this year, 26 versus 14. Queens North up 15 shootings year to date, and that's spread out across the borough. Manhattan North is up 24 shootings this year for a 41% increase for the year, 83 versus 59. And Manhattan South is up 14 versus 6. Manhattan as a whole is up 32 shootings this year, primarily driven by marijuana, narcotics, gang violence. The increases occurred in Manhattan housing developments, 33 this year versus 18 last year, for a 15 shooting increase. And that's spread out. Manhattan South is 9 versus 3. Manhattan North is 23 versus 15. We have made significant arrests in Manhattan South relating to violence in housing. And we've also identified a box where we have deployed extra high visibility patrol and plainclothes patrols in Manhattan North in areas that are identified as vulnerable to more violence. We continue to work with the mayor's office to prevent gun violence, to bring violence interrupters to all neighborhoods, including directing the mobile trauma unit to areas including the 2-3 and the 2-5 precinct. Our investigative component continues to prevent shootings by gathering intelligence related to retaliation and gun possession to be disseminated to our uniform and plainclothes officers who do the dangerous work of removing guns from our street. Our long-term investigations that are ongoing have a direct correlation to the violence in Manhattan North and Manhattan South. And we always pivot to domestic shooting fatalities because last year we had 16, this year we're down to 2. And year to date, we're up 59 guns versus 26 in our domestic gun referral program. Rape was down last month and is up 26, Rape was down last month and is up 26 crimes this month, which speaks to the fluctuations in reporting. So 173 versus 147. The increase is driven primarily by domestic rapes, 60 versus 34. 173 rapes, 150 are reported this year, happening this year. Your printed crime brief has more extensive data regarding rape and UCR rape. Robbery is up 11% this September, with personal electronic devices the most common item targeted during robberies. Felony assault is down slightly during September. Domestic violence usually represents 40% of the total number. However, there is a decrease of 80 domestic assaults, 625 versus 705, which is now accounting for 36% of the total of felony assaults. Grand larceny had an increase of 55 crimes. The category of unattended property, left in auto, left on the back of your chair at a restaurant, on a bench. These types of thefts represent almost 50% of grand larcenies, and they can be prevented by people being aware of their surroundings. Grand larceny auto increased 586 versus 513, a 14% increase, and these are cars stolen, not motorcycles, and very often that car is running. I'd like to just take a moment to talk about burglary. It is again at an all-time low, falling below 1,000 for the first time in September with 857 burglary reports. This is the 12th consecutive month New York City has seen a reduction in burglary. These reductions are seen across the city with 6 of our 8 patrol boroughs setting all-time lows in September and for 2019 year-to-date. Burglary is a crime that doesn't discriminate, and it is an intense violation when a criminal invades your home or business. The work of our NCOs, sectors, detectives, and evidence control specialists cannot be overstated. Burglary is a labor-intensive crime to solve between forensics, canvassing for witnesses, and scouring a neighborhood for video, and looking for stolen property, oftentimes with more than a day lag from occurrence to reporting. Since the inception of neighborhood policing in 2015, there has been a 30% reduction in burglaries. In other words, there are over 3,000 fewer burglary victims since the inception of neighborhood policing in 2015. So thank you very much.
I'll take some questions on the September crime stats. Yep.
I have a question about the hate crimes statistics. 2, the first is what constitutes other, and the second is I saw that there's a 92% increase in crime against white people. I don't know if you have any more information on that.
So just broad numbers. When you look at the hate crimes through this week, a plus 80 on the incidents, that comes out to a 33% increase. When you look at the arrests, we're plus 25 on the arrests. It's a 21% increase. When you look at the categories of crime, it continues to be anti-Semitic, which is driving the overall. As to the other category, as you can see from that sheet I believe we put out, we list many. What falls into the other category is when you have duplication. So you may have a crossover with more than one category. And we'd be willing to break that out for you.
White people, I mean, just because it's the largest uptick, is there any duplication with that as well?
No, there is not duplication, but what we're seeing really is no specific patterns, really, citywide in terms of that. Percentage-wise, big increase, but in terms of numbers, certainly not driving the city.
And it's all over, there's no like specific neighborhoods where it's increasing?
No specific patterns.
Any other questions about crime stats? Ashley?
In September, there was the shooting in the Eaton Wall houses that preceded Officer Mulcahy's death. I'm wondering if any suspects have been identified, have there been any arrests?
Talking about the shots fired job the week before? Derek?
So, yeah, that, excuse me, Ashley, that was on the 27th, a couple days earlier. What was alarming about that incident from a deployment standpoint, from Rodney and myself, from an investigative, is the number of firearms. We believe there was up to 5 firearms at the scene of that shooting, not all deployed. In terms of the individuals, we are actively working on identifying who was out there, what role individuals had, and we will address it as we do everything with precision.
Commissioner, you mentioned that you all were in discussions with the Bronx District Attorney to release some of that body camera footage. What's the status of
No, we're in discussions. This is an active investigation with the Bronx DA's office. So at some point, I'd like Chief Maloney and Chief Monahan to walk everybody through that shooting. Going to end up releasing some of it, but certainly not to the point where probably right before Detective Mulcahy gets shot, just to what led up to it.
I asked you this question yesterday, and maybe something's changed in the last 24 hours. I'm wondering if Mr. Williams was identified as a suspect in that shots fired, or if he had anything to do with those groups that you believe to be involved.
Yeah, it's a little preliminary, but at this time, no. But it's an active investigation.
Yep.
Could you elaborate on the shootings related to pot sales? What is happening there that's driving that?
Sure. Laura, you want to go into that?
We just see, particularly Manhattan North, shootings that involve either a competition amongst dealers on the street or rips where they're moving amounts of money and marijuana, and that's resulting in one party robbing the other.
Are these necessarily gang-related? Or
Yes, yes.
Yep.
I'm wondering if there was anything more on the vandals who attacked the Williamsburg Synagogue of Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, let's we'll get to that in a second. Any more questions about September crime numbers? Yeah, Dave.
Commissioner, you may have mentioned this, but at the beginning when you were talking about the recruit class, I think you mentioned that 27% of the class is women. What is the minority breakdown in the class? You know, or does anyone have that?
Sure.
60% of the class is minority. 60, yeah, so 27%. So whites are 34%, Hispanics 32%, African Americans 17%, and Asians 13%.
I want to circle back to the hate crimes numbers. There was a big uptick in the number of Asian people were targeted from 1 to 9. I'm wondering if there's if a group in particular is being targeted, if there was one particular.
The one that stands out with that one is, if you think back earlier this year, that terrible incident in, I want to say, the 61st precinct, where the individual went into the Chinese restaurant with a hammer and struck and killed multiple people. I believe that was 4 of the incident right there. Off the top of my head, the other 5 I don't recall. That's year to date, but we can certainly follow up with you.
All right, any other questions about the September crime numbers? If not, we'll move on to off-topic police. Yep.
So just going back to the Rosh Hashanah vandals attacking the Williamsburg Synagogue last week, any updates on the investigation and the arrests?
Yeah, so I'll just dig a little deeper into some of the hate crime statistics. Citywide, year-to-date, anti-Semitic hate crimes are up 59 raw numbers. That's a 53% increase. As I said, that does make up the majority of the overall citywide hate crimes. The number one precinct that we see is the 9-4 with 13. They're up 13 versus 3. Specifically, just in the last couple weeks, a couple that may or may not tie together. It's a little ongoing in terms of the investigation, but we have the incident you're talking about where a crate was thrown through a synagogue window. We've put out a poster of that. We're asking the public for any information. On that poster that you put out, you see a female in possession of the crate and actually flings it through, causing the damage. But that female is accompanied by another female as well as a male, at least. It's interesting to note the females there because then we have in the 7-9 precinct 3 incidents where individuals are targeted on the street by, it's often described as interchangeable young kids sometimes, and there are at times males, but it's in these at least, mostly females, where they're going up to, in one instance, it's a female white 22. In another incident, it's a female white 25, and pulling wigs off of their head. Then they have a third incident also with female perpetrators where they go up to some young kids and start hitting their hair. Now, it's unknown if they're trying to pull the hair. It was, in fact, not a wig. So you have in close proximity there the incident at the synagogue. You have these 3 incidents that I'm talking about. Females common denominator in them, and they're actively being worked on by our hate crimes task force.
Follow up, I know some Jewish community leaders and councilmen called on the mayor and NYPD to deploy more boots on the ground for the upcoming holidays.
Yep. So Chief Monahan and Chief Harrison met with Council Member Chaim Deutsch this morning. So I don't know, Rodney or Terry, when do you want to talk about that?
I'll jump originally. We put out a lot of resources, especially tonight with Yom Kippur. Our counterterrorism units will be putting out over 130 some odd police officers at various synagogues throughout the city. I think over a quarter of them are going to be in Brooklyn. There's been some overtime put out, so we're figuring a good 20, 25 additional cars working in those areas, working around the synagogues all night with their turret lights on. Our neighborhood coordination officers and our steady sectors have been tasked to go visit every one of their synagogues that are having services within their sector today. So we're going to have a very large presence out in Brooklyn and throughout the city tonight through Yom Kippur.
Hazel?
Once the holidays are over, will we be increasing security in those predominantly Jewish neighborhoods, considering the uptick in anti-Semitic crime?
Yeah, we'll continue to work with community leaders and elected officials. The precinct commanders will work to make sure, in conjunction with the NCOs, to make sure that the people feel comfortable with the coverage that we have. Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, do we know, and Ms. Mayor, if Randy Santos acted under the influence of drugs? Was it mental illness? Was it a combination of the two? And do we know if any new city or court program or initiative allowed him to be on the streets instead of waiting in jail for the cases that...
All right, so why don't we do this? Chief Shea will just give you a very general background on where we are with the investigation. I don't want to get too specific because this is an ongoing case.
So in terms of Mr. Santos, Saturday he was stopped. Some excellent work by the officers shortly after that horrific crimes took place. Throughout Saturday and into Sunday, we worked very closely with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and were able to bring charges of murder for the individuals that lost their lives in that terrible incident. In terms of the mental state or capacity of the individual, I don't think that's appropriate at this point. There is a forum for that to be worked out through the courts. We had probable cause to make the arrest, and I would refer any questions regarding his mental state to the prosecutor's office. I would ask regarding Mr. Santos to anyone with information about not just these incidents, any other victims that may be out there. We have an active investigation into another incident where Mr. Santos may have played a role. We believe he did. It occurred approximately 1 week before, where he encountered a homeless person, again, sleeping on the west side this time. So anyone with any other information, no matter how small, please call our Crime Stoppers unit, and we will funnel that to the appropriate detectives.
Julie?
In the other incident, we had an individual that was sleeping approximately just north of Chelsea Piers, if you're familiar with the area, on the West Side Highway. The individual was woken up being hit by an object. There was a physical confrontation where the individual believes that the possibility exists that he was being attempted to be thrown over the banister into the water. When you look back at that incident now, we have recovered, as we sit here today, video of Mr. Santos, not close, but in proximity to that crime, approximately 7 blocks away, within the distance where he could have clearly been at that scene. So that is an active investigation. Unfortunately, in that incident, the individual was asleep. We don't have individuals that can readily identify him, but we're building that case as we go forward.
And the condition of the individual?
He's stable.
He's in the hospital?
He sustained cuts to his chest, and if he was hospitalized, it was not serious, is my understanding.
Did that victim report it to police at the time it happened?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
What day did that happen?
That was on September 27th.
Was the weapon recovered in that?
No, there was not a weapon recovered.
Time on the 27th?
I don't know.
Any idea what
It
weapon?
was sleeping, I believe it was on the overnight, but we could certainly get back to you.
You know what he used to beat the man?
No, it's described in that case as a stick. Again, you have an individual that was sleeping, that was, my understanding is, not readily capable of providing significant facts, was woken, you can imagine, woken up from a sleep and under attack. So we'll go forward with the investigation. As again I said, we did not have anyone at that time, but as we go forward a week, and now we have Mr. Santos in custody and start piecing together pieces of this puzzle. We have him approximately 7 blocks away. Very clear video who we believe is Mr. Santos on that evening, and we believe he was responsible for that attack at this point.
This victim survived, whereas the other 4 men didn't stand a chance.
That would be speculation. I'll stay away from that right now.
Can you describe where this man was sleeping?
Yeah, he was on a bench on the West Side Highway, again, just north of Chelsea Piers, in the 20s. If you're familiar with it, there's a bike path, then there's some trees, and then there's, inside of the bike path, there's a beautiful walking area.
And Mr. Mayor, can you talk about Kendra's law? And you committed to enforcing Kendra's law in 2015, if I'm correct. And has it been an increase on the times that Kendra's law has been enforced under your watch in the last few years?
The numbers I have for, I believe this is all of 2018, but we'll confirm this for you, was that Kendra's law was used 2,500 times approximately. So I don't know the specifics of how that compares to each of the previous years. We can get you that. But the point is, I believe it is an important law that we should use whenever appropriate. We have to follow that law. It is one of the tools. And we're going to use, we have been using Kendra's law, we will be using Kendra's law, but there's a lot of other things that we have to do even more of, and that involves more outreach teams, which we've been building up over recent years, more investments in mental health professionals for shelters and other facilities. This is going to be a long effort to really reach people as early as possible in whatever their trajectory is. And that's where investments are going. The goal here is to identify anyone with a problem as early as possible and act on it, whether that's using Kendra's law or any other tool we have.
What do you think we can see an increase in people, in homeless people in New York in the last few years that could seem to suffer from mental illness? Why is there an increase, at least visibly, not only in the subway system, but only in the streets?
I don't know, from my information I've been given, I don't know if that's the whole story. I mean, what we know, looking at the shelter system versus the street, the shelter system used to be much, much higher percentage of folks with mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. We know the shelter system has changed profoundly, and now more and more is what we could call economic homelessness. The street has always been a place where the primary problems were mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. The number of street homeless in the last Hope count actually went down. It's still a very real problem, but we know the Homestat strategy is starting to work. We've gotten over 2,000 people in, and they've stayed in. We've got a lot more to do. But I don't know if we can say there's been a change in reality. I think the very sad truth is we've always had a substantial number of folks with mental health challenges on the street, and that goes back to deinstitutionalization in the 70s and 80s. What we have to do now that we've never done before, and we're trying to do that through Thrive and other strategies, is put in place consistent, pervasive mental health services for people who are on the street, who are in shelter, but even more importantly, before they ever end up in one of those situations.
What do you say to the critics that say that the Chinatown murders are proof that Thrive NYC isn't proof?
That's an absolute misunderstanding of what's going on here. We have a very tragic incident here, but not one, from what we know so far, that could possibly have been predicted from what we saw in this case. Now, there's a full investigation going on. As we learn more, we're going to say what we can say. There are privacy laws, obviously. We have to be careful about that. But in any incident, we want to know what we can learn from it. We want to do things differently if there's something we need to do differently. But no, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding going on here. With mental health, you don't get a roadmap. You don't get the easy dynamic of knowing what's going to happen with a human being. What we know is there's a lot of people with mental health challenges who are not getting treatment. And we have to change that at the foundation. That's the whole concept of Thrive. We're going to deepen that constantly. Because a lot of people, if we could reach them early, again, they'd never end up on the street. They'd never end up violent if we could reach them early enough.
Sad to say that the New York Post published a very scathing report about Thrive NYC. How would you respond to that in terms of what you know about it firsthand?
Well, I would say that I don't turn to the New York Post for facts. And the truth is that Thrive NYC is an attempt to do what has never been done before, which is to create a pervasive access to mental health services in New York City. It's never been done in this country. It should have been done a long time ago. It should have been done in this city a long time ago. It will not happen easily because we're trying to right something so wrong. You know that mental health and physical health have never been treated the same in our society, and that's part of what we're paying for now. This is something that should have been done a long time ago very deeply. But we're going to consistently change that reality by having a whole lot more mental health professionals out there, a lot more access to mental health services, a lot more information so people know where to turn, a lot easier ability of people to turn for help. And we're going to keep doing that. And it's already reached hundreds of thousands of people. It's going to reach a lot more.
Is this specific crime, the murders in Chinatown, inspiring a shift in policy when it comes to either homelessness or mental health or policing? But is there a specific change in policy that will result from these murders?
No, until we have more information. The fact is, and I'll speak for myself, and the Commissioner can speak in terms of his efforts with PD. Right now, we have an investigation that until we know all the facts, we cannot judge what changes we might make. Once we get all the facts, we might see something we want to do differently. But right now, the goal is to get every homeless person off the street, which is through the Homestat strategy, which has actually been working, and we finally are seeing a reduction in street homelessness. We got a lot more to do, and particularly in the subways. In terms of public safety in general, obviously the strategies generally are working, and we want to keep deepening them, but they're working. In terms of mental health, we got to get a lot more services to a lot more people earlier, and that's what Thrive is attempting to do. So the basic strategies are the right ones, but we're going to learn from this case and see if there's something we have to do differently.
I wanted to ask you about New York City Safe. It's an initiative you rolled out in 2015 with various services for mentally ill people. I wanted to know if you could tell me how many people have interacted with that service since you began, and if you know if Randy Santos, I know in the past the city was able to say if certain suspects were involved in New York City Safe and the programs that offer.
So New York City Safe involves coordination of key agencies, including the health department, including on health information, and there are privacy laws. So I think it is appropriate in certain cases to talk about what happened with individuals, but we can talk about the broad strokes of what we're learning for sure. So in this case, we don't have all the facts yet. They're still being put together by PD and others. In the overall situation, we'll get you the exact numbers, but we know that a number of people were identified and constantly monitored and got mental health services, which was the goal of it. But we can get you an update on how many have been covered.
You don't have Any, because the health.
I don't have the latest numbers.
Give me actual data, drugs, I need the data.
Again, we'll get you what we can within the law.
Mr. Mayor, yesterday I spoke to the director of Thrive, who said that somebody can be removed from the street if they are a danger to themselves or others. Obviously, Mr. Santos has a history of violence, so why couldn't he have been removed?
I have to turn to PD from what they know so far, and again, it's a preliminary investigation. Each case is different, so I just want to caution. I think I said this last night on New York One. We have to have an honest conversation as New Yorkers. I think a lot of people would like the easy solution, just anyone who seems to be a problem is removed and sent to a mental institution. That's what happened in this state and this country for decades and decades. It led to horrific outcomes for a lot of people. And then all of that was turned around with deinstitutionalization, which then was done so poorly it led to the modern homelessness crisis. So we don't want to go back on that merry-go-round. We need to be really clear about that moment where someone is a danger to themselves or others, where they should be forcibly removed from the streets, where they should be compelled to get treatment, versus a situation where there's other tools we have to use. We have to be careful about that because we don't have endless capacity to put people in mental institutions, because that can have huge negative consequences itself, and because it's a country of laws that respects individual liberty. So that's a really fine line. But in every case, just to finish that, in every case the question is, was that standard met? And with Kendra's law, for example, there are very specific standards in the law. You had to have been hospitalized, for example. One standard is you had to have been hospitalized multiple times for a mental health condition. These are things we need to look at in this case. Would it have been the kind of conditions to trigger the use of Kendra's law? As I said, we use it frequently. We have to look in each case of whether it's the appropriate thing to use.
Is there a database for people who are troubled or are violent that they are tracked? How does anybody track people who have the potential again?
So before the last few years, to the best of my knowledge, there wasn't. And that's why we created the NYC SAFE approach that Katie was just referring to, that tracks people to make sure they are getting treatment or they may be appropriately incarcerated or in a mental institution or whatever it may happen to be. That, again, has to be done with real respect to the law, to privacy rights, to individual liberty. But it's the first time we've ever had the capacity to actually monitor to make sure people are getting the treatment they're supposed to be getting. There's much more to do, but at least we have something that gives us the ability to do that now.
Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line and say this person has gone over the line and is a threat to himself and to others?
Each case.
Every case is individual. We do have, the NYPD on our end, we do have the co-response units, where we have 2 police officers with a mental health professional that they go out each day and they visit people proactively to see that things are continuing to be okay for them and if they are in need of additional assistance. But it's a difficult call to, like you said, how do you draw the line? We've had interactions. I think he was arrested 6 prior times, right? And a number of sealed arrests also. Then we bring him into the criminal justice system, and those determinations need to be made.
In Mr. Santos's prior interactions with the NYPD, I think they number up to 14 or 17. Does the NYPD keep any record of how often arrestees are sent for a psychiatric evaluation? And then the second question I want to ask is, what's the status of the identification of the 5th victim? Do you have a tentative name? Are you doing dental or DNA to try to figure out who he is, where that is?
We have him with six arrests and a number of other sealed arrests. And I think we have 1 aided job where he was removed. I don't know when the year is. I have to give you that check on that information. But this is information that we compile, and after we arrest them, we work with the prosecutor's office to figure out what the proper avenue is here for this person that we arrested.
Right, but in any prior instance, was he taken to Bellevue or a similar hospital for a psych eval before he was placed under arrest?
I'd have to get back to you, Ashley.
And then on the ID of the 5th victim?
Within the last 12 hours, we believe we have an identification on the 5th victim. The family has not yet been notified.
Do you have any information? Can you say anything about his age or race? And any prior contacts with NYPD, whether
He's a male Hispanic, approximately 39 years of age, and I'll leave it at that. And we'll have it probably soon as we can make a notification to family.
What's his condition? Is he in the hospital? He passed the
Second row.
Mr. Mayor, you said earlier that you don't trust any facts that you read in the New York Post. So I was just curious why you would go on Fox News and other News Corp channels to promote yourself if you're accusing one of their major properties of
Can we,
being factually inaccurate.
Happily answer it when we do this.
Finish police off topic and then.
So reset.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you have any reaction to the hearing, Middle Village, I think it was last night, on the homeless.
Again, we're still on police off topic. Let's finish that and we'll go to other things.
Commissioner, you said you would be having a separate update about the Edenwald housing incident. Melanie,
Yes.
if you could just, do you have any details to offer about why Antonio Williams was stopped in the first place? Did he have a gun out? Did they?
Yeah, I want to give you a full briefing on it. I don't want to do it piecemeal. Okay?
Another question.
Sure.
What is your response to the Bronx DA releasing a list of cops with credibility issues? And do you think other DAs should do the same?
Yeah, Deputy Commissioner Hart will speak about that. Ernie?
It's, let me give you a little bit of a background. 2014, the police department itself organized a adverse credibility finding committee in an effort to understand why courts, federal and state courts, were finding credibility problems with some of the testimony that police officers gave in the past. When we look at each adverse credibility finding, we determine, first of all, whether or not we agree with it. If we do, there could be training, could be reassignment. If there's really purposeful wrongdoing, then it would be referred to internal affairs and/or the department advocate. This is an issue that we understand that we take seriously, and just want to make sure that police officers understand what is expected of them. Could be they're nervous, could be a lot of reasons. So we do take this seriously, and we're continuing to look at it.
Do you think other DA's offices should follow suit?
It's not a question of whether or not they should. It's a question that we have to deal with, and we are.
Great.
Commissioner, there's been some debate about the department's use of facial recognition, some efforts to regulate it, both proposals to ban government agencies from using it as we've done in San Francisco, or just to require the NYPD to disclose all more information about all its technology. Can you speak to why this kind of technology is useful to the department, and how would you react to proposals to ban or more severely regulate it?
Yeah, I'd absolutely be opposed to a ban. I think it's a tool that we use. Again, it's a lead. No one is being arrested solely on a facial recognition hit. There's so much video in the city, New York City today, that to not use facial recognition would be irresponsible. It brings justice to a lot of the victims out there, enabling us to use that and to eventually using it as a lead to apprehend people who are doing other people harm. Yep. Right there.
I was wondering if you are changing police training in any way as a response to the incident with Detective Monkey?
Yeah, Chief Shortell will speak about that. Teresa is the Chief of Training.
Okay, so, excuse me. So this week we've started a advanced tactical pistol course. All the anti-crime cops are going through the course together as a team, and this is certainly going to help us with the tactics that we see are as a concern. We also have tactical videos that are going to be going out on a bi-weekly basis. Again, we identify tactics that we see are a concern, and we put it out there. We also, last week, opened up the TAC Center. The TAC Centers are over in the 111 precinct. It's a borough-based tactical training. It'll give us a footprint throughout the city, and these TAC Centers will be opened up throughout the city as we move on.
Now, how many officers are we talking about when you say all anti-crime cops? Can you just generally help the public understand what you mean when you say advanced pistol training?
So that's, you're asking how many for plainclothes or anti-crime?
Through this training that you're speaking about?
All right, well, the training, just to let you know, is going to be 2 instructors to 1 MOS as the ratio, which is a hands-on ratio. And probably about 900 anti-crime cops in plainclothes in the precincts, and then we're going to be doing the other various units also.
Understand what you mean when you say advanced technical pistol training?
It's any issue that we see as, it could be gun retention, it could be chasing somebody versus surveillance on somebody, anything that we see as a concern, we try to share best practices, from borough to borough. Any lesson we learn in the Bronx, we don't want to repeat it in Brooklyn and vice versa.
Dave?
This crackdown on illegal activity in Battery Park, has the police department interacted at all with Alec Baldwin and his family on the complaint that they have?
Not on this, on other cases.
That was good.
You've been holding out.
That was, drop the mic. Drop the mic there. Very good. Wow. Who's your writer?
I don't know.
He saw that pitch coming.